Our next speaker is Ritu Kapoor. Ritu is the co-founder and CEO of the Quint, an English and Hindi language Indian news website launched in 2015. She has driven digital innovation at Quintillion Media, from redesigning sites to starting the innovation lab to launching a health vertical fit to driving the fight against the misinformation with Webakoof. Ritu has also strived to provide multiple platforms for free speech. One such platform is Talking Stocking, where the Quint collaborated with senior advocate Kamini Jaiswal and Member of Parliament Dr. Shashi Tharoor to submit a bill in Parliament to make stalking a non-bailable offence. Others include the Quint's multilingual campaign BOL and its citizen journalism initiative, My Report. She is on the advisory board of Oxford University's Reuters Institute of Journalism, the World Editors Forum at Van Infra, and Future News Worldwide. In 2017, Ritu Kapoor has been organized by Outlook Business as Women of Worth, the newsmaker. Ritu will take us through how fake news and misinformation is shaping public opinion. Welcome, Ritu.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. And I unfortunately couldn't get listen to all of Guy Berger's talk, but I definitely caught the end and got the very valuable exchange that he had with participants here. I'm going to dive straight into how I look at how we as journalists could be taking on fake news. It's a tough battle. It's fake news, misinformation is a multi-funded, well-orchestrated. It's not just individuals sitting in little corners and being devious. It's a huge operation which needs as structured a fight back as possible. If I could just share my screen, I'll. Is that okay? Is my
Yes, it's coming fine.
Okay. So I'm just taking another view at, instead of first diving straight into fake news, I'm looking at why we need to look at trust before we look at fake news. So journalism is defined as the pursuit of truth, but I think it's now very, very important for us to look at it as the pursuit of trust. Sorry, just give me as a pursuit of trust. Because it's why is the citizen, why are people moving away from news? Why is there why are people clustering around social media instead of news sites? It's because there is a huge erosion of trust. And to understand why fake is winning over fact, I think it's important to understand the erosion of trust in news. And it's first important to understand why fake news is winning, and to understand that we need to look at the new entrants that govern the news landscape. And I've divided them up into the 3 Ps, which I look at as polarization, propaganda, and populism, which has led to a centralized information strategy, a new form of propaganda, where most large media, legacy media, are speaking the same language, demonizing the same enemies, and presenting the same arguments, very often in support of the government. It has led us to, we need to understand why Just give me a minute. I just lost track of my sheet. Just a second. Sorry. Right. So it's an environment of polarization, propaganda, and populism. It is an environment of where if independent journalism is critical of their leadership by questioning their policies, their politics, their tweets even, those in leadership are ironically weaponizing fake news, the term fake news, against news media itself. They're engaging journalists in never-ending defamation cases, litigation, raids, choking them through regulatory policies, bleeding them financially, legally, diverting funds which are meant for journalism. Those funds are moving towards legal fees and posting bail. And in this process, there is delegitimizing of all news media in the eyes of the consumer of news, which takes me to the two S's of trust erosion, which is self-censorship and social media. An unprecedented number of legal notices, defamation, sedition cases have been filed over the past few years in India against journalists. Of course, we all know what's happening against activists and citizens, anyone who voices dissent. Then there are the news outfits currently who are entirely dependent on government advertising as revenue. What happens as a consequence of this? It leads to self-censorship because news media tries to avoid doing a story which is going to embroil them in litigation or is going to have them branded as fake news because that serves somebody's agenda. And in the process, you're actually avoiding a lot of stories that are important to the people. That leads to trust erosion. Censorship leads to trust erosion. That's a given. The second S for me is social media, which has in some ways got conflated with news media, with its high volume, low quality information, which people can mistake for news very often. Social media leaves users exposed primarily to posts by others with similar views, creating vast echo chambers which are founded on misinformation. So these are spaces where our own opinions and biases are constantly reinforced by our filtered feeds that very often also play up fake content. It's a web of algorithms which deepens already divided views and cultural rifts. And it becomes a space for where fake news can really grow and be spawned. So here's where we are at, if you ask me right now, which is I look at the circle of misinformation, trust, and public opinion. There is media capture through the ways that we talked about, through the process of delegitimizing and choking independent journalism, which leads to delegitimizing of independent news media, and it takes people to social media. There is we talked about the self-censorship and erosion of trust, and therefore the deepening of divides, which further leads to media capture. Similarly, on social media, it leads to, it allows fake news to really find oxygen, which leads to echo chambers, which again leads to media capture. So this is a circle, and currently where we are adding to the circle of misinformation is the pandemic, which has led to the loss of jobs, the state of the economy, a lot of confusion about what this pandemic is about. These are times of immense uncertainty and fear where people relate to all news emotionally. And now if you're looking at a situation where news media has been delegitimized, in that environment, people trust news coming from those whom they have a relationship with. So they are finding solace on online messaging communities, for instance, which unfortunately can be and have been exploited as super spreaders of misinformation. So, we can't be in India and look away from the one big W, which is undermining the what, when, where, why, who, how of journalism, which is WhatsApp. Now, why is WhatsApp winning now more than ever before? Ritu Kapoor, he's a Knight Fellow with the International Center for Journalists. He applied cognitive psychology in his research on understanding cognition and how it makes misinformation persuasive on WhatsApp. And he found, these are the 5 reasons he found, which is relevance, ease of comprehension, influence or trust, bias, and story coherence. I think it's very important because to fight the enemy, you need to understand the enemy. So it's very, very important to understand what is working in favor of fake news. And if you want to bring people back to news, that clearly can happen only by building a relationship of trust with the people. And that's where the erosion. So I think what I really think it's really, really important to look at how trust can be won back in an environment where trust in news is at an all-time low. And I think the onus is on us as people who are journalists or as media people. So let's see how we can use Ritvija's findings to figure how, what's making WhatsApp work and how can we use some of that to make news work for people. First is bias, which is a huge issue. I think Guy as well referred to it in his talk on how a lot of news is now becoming opinion of propaganda. But I think it's really, really important for the liberals to also watch out for our own bias. And that is really the first stop. In your journalism, that's a question you need to ask constantly. Am I reporting the fact first, or is my bias coming in the way I'm presenting the facts? Nick Newman, in his 2020 Digital News Report, which is a study that's carried out by the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism every year, he says divided societies trust news media less, not necessarily because journalism is worse, but because people are generally dissatisfied with institutions in their country, and because news outlets often carry more views that people disagree with. I think we have to take a look at this a little closely and try and see how we interpret it. I interpret it as in an environment where the state and the fourth estate are screaming fake at each other. They're actually in the process delegitimizing all information. And fact, therefore, becomes a casualty in the process. And then again, people seek solace in family messenger groups for news they think they can trust because it's coming from someone they trust. So how do we become the people that people trust in? And it's quite clearly facts first. 60% of those surveyed for this report said that they prefer news that has no particular point of view. Only 28% prefer news that reinforces their view. What my takeaway from that is that people want the facts first, and then perhaps a transparent, honest take of the journalist on the news event. But if the news report starts with a slant or is slanted all the way, it automatically makes the reader suspicious of the content. Remember, no one likes to be told what to think. Most of us appreciate being deftly guided to our own understanding and conclusion. So you're actually undermining the intelligence of the reader if you think they need to be fed the opinion constantly. Another very important aspect of bias, and I think one that we really need to look at more than ever in this country, is the bias in the newsroom. We know that for years there's been an intrinsic bias in the newsroom because newsrooms have not been representative or plural enough. Newsroom diversity has been an issue forever. It's too male, too white, too upper class, too Brahmin. Now, if people don't see themselves represented in the news, then that's a first step to erode towards trust erosion. It's important to be representative in your newsroom as much in your journalism. You need voices across religion, caste, class, gender, geographies. I mean, we know in India that a lot of mainstream national media is too North Indian biased, or it's too Brahmin in the way it approaches news. So one way to build trust is for your journalism to be the voice of people across demographics. I'll move to another one of Ritvija's findings on why WhatsApp works, and that is ease of comprehension. Remember, it is not it's not the people's civic duty to read the news. It's our job to make it appealing and interesting and something that people want to consume. Our job is to draw them in. Here's a quote from Philip Mayer, and he says, when information was scarce, most of our efforts were devoted to hunting and gathering, now that information is abundant, processing is more important. We process at two levels: analysis and presentation of how we put the story across. And I think now it is a responsibility. Remember, today news is fighting with Netflix. It's fighting with cat videos. Everything is being consumed on the same platforms. It's fighting for people's memes. It's fighting, and your news has to stand out in that. If your presentation on the formats in which you're bringing news is old world, or it's journalists writing for other journalists' consumption, you are not going to be able to reach out to the audience. And if you don't, then that's when you're creating vacuums for fake news to come in. I think the point that Philip Mayer makes about us no longer being hunters and gatherers, I mean, look at the instance of the George Floyd tragic incident. It wasn't a journalist who broke the news. It was a citizen who broke the news. It was the job of the journalist to then get the fact verification done and make sense of what had come across. So explaining the news is important. Now, these are confounding times, right? The medical science, let's just take the pandemic, for instance. The medical science is baffling. And it doesn't help when Trump has everyone charging for hydroxychloroquine or, as a magic cure. Or we have right here in India, we have Yoga Guru Baba Ramdev and many of his, of his kind, doling out one Ayurvedic cure after another. Now, it's important now, look at this as an example and see how important it is not just to fact check, but also to explain the news. What is hydroxychloroquine? I even struggle to pronounce the word. And it's important to provide the context. If yesterday the foundation of the mandir in Ayodhya has been laid, remember, a lot of your audience was not born when the Babri Masjid came down. It's very important to bring the context of what led up to this event. So context is now very, very important, especially in the snacking, fast-scrolling environment of news consumption. And it's very important if you are even the first to bring out a news, it's very important to say why that piece of information is relevant to the reader. Why should they engage with that content? The other couple of things that I think is transparency. This is one of the things that we do at the Quint. We do what we call behind the scenes. If we've done a big investigation or a big expose, the journalist documents every stage of how she or he got the story. And that's something that if we can, in some instances, we need to protect the source. But in the instances where we can, we tell the reader or our viewer through a behind the scenes video or an article on how we got the news. I think that goes a long way towards building a relationship of trust. Another thing I think we should always keep in mind is that we shouldn't be talking down to our audience. I think it has to be a relationship of, it's not that you are the truth holder and they are the ignoramus. Very often your audience may know more than you do. Which brings me to a point that that Guy referred to, and that is very, very close to me, is relevance was one of the points that, one of the findings that Ritu had for why WhatsApp works. And for me, I translate relevance as citizen at the center. For too long, news media was one way, where journalists were truth owners and they decided what it is that the citizen needs to know. But now with digital real-time engagement, constant feedback in the form of comments, metrics, that has changed. People feel that they have been left out of the picture for too long. They feel that the news media that they see is no longer about them. It's about one politician screaming at another politician or negating the other politician. To restore trust, we need to have a relationship with the reader, which is why perhaps it's important to once again bring the citizen at the center of your journalism. Let people power your journalism. The stories are about the people, or the stories are ones that people must know, right? Because the whole in this, while digital has done a lot to democratize news, but with it has come a lot of the other tyrants, speed, competition, keywords, Google Trends, the giant platforms, triopoly, and an ad revenue dependent news media has in a lot of ways hijacked the journalist from the citizen. So it is one critical question that you must ask yourself is, what does the citizen want from the news? What are the questions that she needs answered? When we break a story, we need to know why that story would be relevant to that audience, to our audience, to every citizen. We've spent too long just gloating about breaking a story, saying we broke the story first. The first, speed, etc., has taken priority over relevance and placing the citizen at the center of what you're doing. I'll go back again to the finding of the Digital News Report 2020 by the Reuters Institute for Study of Journalism. It shows that the COVID-19 crisis did temporarily increase trust levels in news media in the early stages of the lockdown, when the focus on reporting was on the disease, on exploring questions to the answers all of us had, and the trust fell almost as quickly as the media stepped up its criticism of the government, when the reporting shifted to failures in managing economies, to failures in public health, and the general blame game politics of the virus. The reader went away when the news lost its relevance for her or him. And again, now look at it, the crisis is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to tune into what people need from this information. People need answers in the pandemic. They are coming to the news with uncertainty and fear. They're trying to make sense of a problem that is way too large to comprehend. When we don't provide answers, then something else will come in and fill that void. And what are the chances that that will be misinformation being funneled onto social media by agencies with vested interests? Another way to bring citizen to the center of your journalism is to partner with the citizen journalists. Again, it's not straight creating a platform for citizen journalism, which is why I use the term partnering. See, because now, us as journalists, how are we going out and getting the stories? We're using a mobile phone, right? Which has a mobile phone camera. And that's what the citizen has as well. So again, let's go back to the George Floyd story. The story was broken by a citizen. And the role of the journalist became one of verification, of analysis, to explain, to provide context, to give a historical context, to amplify the story by looking at similar patterns of racism in other parts of the world, and to demand solutions, and to let journalism needs to empower people with information on what rights they can demand from the state. Now, journalists can't be everywhere, but citizens are everywhere. So partnering with citizen journalists not just helps democratize access and dissemination of information, it helps build a bridge of trust between the journalists and the people. And again, my premise is that to fight fake news, you need to build the trust. One of the things that we do at the Quint is, we call it My Report, which is our citizen journalism platform. If we work with citizens from across the country, it gives us access into issues that we would otherwise never have the budgets for, into tribal belts, tribal areas. We have a team especially that just works with the citizens to vet the content, make sure that it's editorially correct and editorially balanced. We also train them to use cameras, to tell their stories with coherence, and support them in whichever way we can. And sometimes that involves knocking on the doors of authorities. And I'll give you two examples of that. This is a gentleman called Amar Gaur. He's a citizen from city of Agra, and he was in a quarantine ward of the civil hospital, which had deplorable conditions. He reached out to us. We in turn reached out to the authorities, and but they refused to comment and refused to do anything. We then trained Amar on how to use his camera to record everything with coherence and to visually show what the conditions were. And once that report went out on the Quint, the authorities sprang to action, and here you have his testimonial, which says, after I got it reported in the My Report section of the Quint, all the basic sanitization conditions of the ward had been met: sanitizers, soaps available, open gutters, who was fixed, drinking water, clean bed sheets, and so on. So this is the kind of partnership that I think is important in building trust. Here's another instance. Similarly, this was a citizen journalist from Bombay. He wrote to us and told us that he almost fell and died on an open gutter. We told him again to shoot it. And here's his testimonial. 12 hours later, I went to the spot to check if anything had been done. To my surprise, the pothole, which was about 4.5 meters long, had been filled. So, the other thing is to bring a little bit of positivity to journalism. There's too much negation. We know that there is a lot of news avoidance. People are moving away from news media because they feel it's too negative. And there's enough studies to show that, which is why stories of solutions, positivity, of, maybe even COVID warriors, those are the ones to also bring back, to balance all the negativity that we unfortunately have to report on. The other initiative that we have, the Quint, is we call it webcoof, which is a play on the word bewakoof, which says that which means you're a fool, and the premise is that if you believe anything that is fake on the internet, you're a webcoof. Now here again, we partner with our reader. We ask our readers to send in. Of course, we do all the fact checking that we find, or all the fake content that we find. But we also partner with our readers, asking them to send us any story that they may come across as suspicious, and we dive in and fact check, and we give the reader who flagged it credit for flagging it. Now, apart from the partnership, this gives us access to those fakes that are in the dark web, like end-to-end encrypted messaging platforms like WhatsApp, where the fake news is floating around on family or friend groups. We wouldn't have access to it if we didn't have, and this also gives us a chance to educate the reader on how to fact check themselves. So we do a lot of tutorials on what to look out for. Look at the URL, look at the date of this publication of the story. Again, we feel that the fact that we are partnering with our readers on fake news, and we get 10 to 30 posts a day, are people asking us to fact check for us on stories that they came across. And we think that has actually really, really helped build a relationship of trust for us. So this is something I believe very, very strongly in, which is keeping the citizen at the center of your journalism, which is every story must have the journalist in, the citizen in context. Just a few things on why we think, or we are doing webcoof or our fact check the way we are. I said it gives us access to the darker web. The reader engagement has also helped us to get quicker updates. We are able to fact check a story and put the fact check story out before it goes viral, before it's all over the social media, and before it's reached many, many more people. So we get to beat the fake before it hits all digital highways. And we also try to do stories in a way which helps viewers understand the fact-checking process. So like we do with our investigative journalism, we actually do videos where the fact-checker takes the reader through how the story was fact-checked, with the camera on their, either it's the people that they've gone down to or to check the facts, or their screens where they're using tools to do the fact-checking. Also, we find that it helps to build domain strength to fight the fake, because now, for instance, we have at the Quint, we have a very strong health vertical. It's called FIT. Now, because we had an expertise, a domain expertise there, we had a panel of doctors, specialist talent pool, editorial skills, and more importantly, the access to medical experts that gave us a fantastic edge over other players when the whole COVID fake news exploded. On cures, treatments, virus mutations. And now you'd already built credibility with a vertical, with a health site. And we could then be, therefore, the go-to place for people to get their health stories fact-checked. And there is potential to exploit this further as we show through our videos how we fact-check using tools. And, like I said, the URLs or data publishing, again, a lot of stories that were going viral were actually very, very old stories, and it was easy to tell the viewers that, this is not about the pandemic. This is 3 years old or 4 years old. Goes without saying, no one's going to work with you if your credibility. So at every story, and credibility is you're as credible as your last story. So it's not about just years of having built credibility. One mistake and you lose in today's social media driven world, where one mistake, journalistic mistake, can get amplified many, many times. You just cannot afford to let that be compromised. And here's an important thing: reach is important if you're wanting to fight fake news. For instance, all the fact check that we do, we plow it back into WhatsApp because we know WhatsApp is a super spreader. We make sure that it's there. Because we have a huge reach on social media, we reach about 100 million across all our platforms. And we've also partnered with Facebook to help them do their fact checks and to hunt down fakes. It's very, very important to, and that's where, a mainstream organization or a mainstream journalist has an advantage over a entity which is only doing fact checking, that you have mainstream access to readers, because there's no point doing fact check if it's not reaching the people. So reach is an important factor in fighting fake. Fact check from the field. Too much journalism, unfortunately, happens out of newsrooms. We feel very strongly about this. We do a lot of ground reporting. Now, you see two images here. One is from the Delhi riots that happened earlier in the year, and they were the images of a mosque that had been vandalized, and various news houses, legacy media, was saying that that's actually old video, that is actually old images. The mosque in Ashok Nagar in New Delhi has not been vandalized. That was fake news. So we sent our fact checker, and you can see him standing here. He's standing in front of the mosque, and you can still see the flag which says Jai Shri Ram, and some of the other things, other flags are still up there. So nothing works like a visual ground fact check. The other story that it's not evident from this image, but is when you might remember the Hyderabad rape, the unfortunate rape of the veterinary doctor, and several media organizations were carrying a story saying that she was raped by members of a certain community. And we sent a reporter down to Hyderabad, and she was able to work, and she revealed, using documents that she found by going there, that the rapists were not only one of the rapists was from the so-called community. The rapists were actually, there was a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian among the rapists. So you're able to, so ground reporting is far superior to any other kind of fact check that you can do. Make fact work like fake, which is important, which is, if you understand how fake works, and use those cues to make your fact-checked content work. If it means borrowing vocabulary from the fake news factory, do that, because it's important to get the fact-checked content to reach there. Fake news is simple and emotional, mostly. It rides on emotion. Truth is layered and complicated. So when you do your fact-check, break it down. Don't make it so complicated that it's difficult to access. Make your headlines interesting, your language accessible. Don't be a purist if your news is only going to be understood by the specialists. Sometimes, and we've all been victim of that you do your journalism for appreciation by other journalists. You need to reach out to the people. This is the challenge that I think we all face, especially in India, where there's so many regional languages, and a lot of the fake news is actually very geography and region specific. And I think it's important for there to be enough funding for people, for news organizations that are into fact check, for resources, so that fact check can be done in a hyper local regional languages sort of way. Before I go off, I just want to clearly say that if you're getting into journalism, one of the things you really must know is how is your journalism funded. I understand news needs to survive to be independent to begin with. Rigorous journalism needs serious funding. Journalists working hard to expose the truth, or in these current circumstances, putting their lives at risk, they need to be well compensated. Also, journalism per se needs funding. But at the same time, everyone in the newsroom must understand the revenue model of your organization, especially in these days of decreased revenue and long-term instability. Google, Facebook, Amazon, Tripoli will continue to reign supreme. Predictions are that 70% of all digital ad revenue spending in 2020 will go to these three. That leaves 30% of all online for all the other online companies, of which news is a minuscule part. Media ownership, a small number of companies and conglomerates in India dominate all of the country's media. There are no regulatory safeguards against political control over media in India. And Indian laws do not restrict political ownership in television or print media. So you have to, and there's a lot of, it's very opaque. Who owns a media house, there's a lot of opacity in that, but you as a journalist must find out. You must ask the question, is it a big corporate house whose philanthropy is providing for the journalism? And how else will the corporate house benefit by doing a certain story? Because that corporate presumably has other businesses. Is it ad revenue funded or is it government funded? Whatever be the case, it's important to assess what the source of revenue does to your quality of journalism, because some of the fake originates from that. So these are tough times for news organizations. There are threats to our business. There's constant attempts to delegitimize our work. Our political leaders are dragging us onto a constant online war of pettiness. So it's not easy, but we must continue to pursue truth, make your journalism fact first, hold power to accountability, that goes without saying. Bring the citizen at the center, serving public interest above all. Be diverse, be very careful about biases. Be a truth seeker, not a truth holder. I think that is really, really important. And above all, be good people so we can be great journalists. And that's about it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritu. Our participants have plenty of questions to you. My colleague, Thara CB, shall moderate the question answer session.